It was a Sunday morning in Nashville, the kind that felt too ordinary to ever hold a disaster. The light came in soft through the blinds, catching the steam from the coffee maker, painting everything gold for just a moment. The air smelled like toasted bread and detergent, a house alive in small ways. Even when the people inside it were quietly dying, I was standing in the kitchen, folding laundry beside my wife, Erin. 12 years together, and we had the rhythm down to muscle memory. She handled the delicate stuff. I took the jeans, the towels, the things that didn't need much care. Country radio hummed low in the background, the kind of songs that fill silence without ever really touching it. We didn't talk much. We didn't need to. There's a kind of comfort that grows in routine, or maybe it's just numbness dressed up as peace. Erin had been telling me about something at work, some new manager, someone she didn't like. I nodded at the right places, half listening, half trying to tame a fitted sheet that refused to cooperate. It was normal, harmless conversation, the kind you forget 5 minutes after it ends. But this one didn't end the way I expected. She paused mid-sentence, holding a white blouse in her hands, and then she said it so casually I almost missed it. Sometimes I think I should have married Ryan instead. Just like that, my hands stopped. The radio kept playing. The dryer buzzed in the other room. Ryan. I hadn't heard that name in years. Her old boyfriend, the one she swore was ancient history. I thought it was just a ghost we'd buried long ago, but apparently, she'd been keeping him on life support in her mind. I looked at her, waiting for the punchline, the smirk, some hint that she was joking. Nothing. She just kept folding, as calm as someone discussing the weather. He's successful, she added after a beat. Confident. Not like you. That one landed differently. It wasn't just the words, it was how quiet they were. Like she didn't even need to raise her voice to make them stick. She just said them, and kept moving. As if detonating something in the middle of our kitchen was just another task on her list. I stood there, a gray t-shirt still in my hands, feeling something cold crawl down my spine. I could feel the fabric between my fingers, the texture, the weight. It was such an ordinary thing to hold on to while everything else inside me was starting to unravel. She didn't stop there. At least he's not. Failing at being a husband. That was the moment the world went quiet. No yelling. No plates thrown. No slammed doors. Just a silence so sharp it hummed in my ears. In that moment, I felt something shift, not just between us, but inside me, like the foundation of who I thought I was had cracked. And I was hearing the sound of it breaking in real time. I didn't say a word. I didn't trust myself to. Anger would have been easier. But what I felt wasn't anger. It was something heavier. Quieter. Shame. Maybe. Or disbelief. The kind that doesn't burn, it just settles in your bones and starts to rearrange you. I stared at the laundry basket, at the socks and shirts that used to mean something, proof of a shared life. But suddenly, even the routine felt hollow. Like we'd been performing marriage long after it had stopped being real. She didn't look up once. Didn't notice me freeze. Or maybe she did. And it didn't matter. So, I did the only thing I could think to do. I set down the shirt, wiped my hands on my jeans, and walked out of the room. No scene. No speech. Just distance. I walked into my home office, the one small space that still felt like mine, and closed the door behind me. The click of that latch sounded final in a way I can't explain. I sat down at my desk, hands still shaking. For a long time, I just stared at the wall, trying to make sense of the moment that had just rewritten everything. It's strange the sound of betrayal isn't loud. It's not a scream or a crash. It's the washing machine still spinning in the background. It's the hum of the refrigerator. It's the clatter of someone folding laundry like nothing happened. That's what I remember most. The normalcy of it. My phone buzzed on the desk, some email from work. Something trivial. I couldn't even look at it. The words she'd said were still replaying in my head. Looping. Echoing until they didn't sound like words anymore. Just proof that whatever I thought we weren't that anymore. I leaned back in the chair, eyes on the ceiling. The air felt thick, heavy. I thought about the years behind us, the late-night talks, the plans, the quiet victories, the quiet failures. I thought about every time she'd told me we were in this together, and I wondered when together had quietly turned into against. 12 years. That's how long it takes to build something you think will last forever. And sometimes, It takes just one sentence to burn it to the ground. I remember looking down at my hands, the same hands that built our home. Fixed her car. Held her through hospital nights. Held her after bad news. After the fertility doctor told us it was unlikely. Those hands had done everything to hold our life together, but now they were just empty. For a second, I thought about going back into the kitchen, demanding an explanation, asking her why. But I already knew the answer, or maybe I was too afraid to hear it said out loud again, so I stayed there, still, quiet, listening to the washing machine finish its cycle. The beeping sound marking the end of something far bigger than laundry. There's a kind of pain that doesn't scream. It doesn't demand attention or throw a tantrum. It just rearranges you. And sitting there in that small office, behind a closed door, I realized that's exactly what was happening to me. That was the day something inside me broke. And though I didn't know it yet, it was also the day something else began to wake up. Something I hadn't felt in a long time. The part of me that was done being small. The part of me that was finally ready to walk away. The days that followed didn't explode. They just sank. Morning came like it always did, sunlight sneaking through the blinds. The smell of coffee. The clatter of dishes. But everything felt staged. Like I was walking through a play I didn't remember auditioning for. Erin sat across from me at the table, scrolling her phone, her thumb moving faster than her eyes. We didn't talk. She'd take a sip of her coffee, make a face if it was too strong, and scroll again. It's strange how fast routine can turn into a ghost. The same walls, same furniture, same faces, but suddenly the air feels crowded with something you can't see. Something that lingers long after the words that caused it are gone. She'd look up sometimes, like she was going to say something, but then she'd glance back at the screen instead, and I'd find myself pretending to read the paper, pretending not to notice that the person sitting 3 feet away from me felt 1,000 miles off. I started fixing things around the house, the leaky faucet, the loose step on the porch, the broken hinge on the cabinet. It was easier to mend things that didn't talk back. Each repair felt like a way to keep my hands busy so my mind wouldn't spiral. But no matter how much I fixed, the silence between us just kept widening, like a crack spreading through drywall. At night, I'd lie in bed next to her, the same bed we'd shared for over a decade, and listen to her breathing. Slow, steady, controlled. Maybe asleep, maybe pretending. I couldn't tell anymore. Sometimes I'd stare at the ceiling and think about how we got here, how two people could go from finishing each other's sentences to running out of words entirely. And then, without warning, my mind would drift back to that doctor's office years ago. It had been 5 years of trying, 5 years of schedules, pills, temperature charts, and quiet disappointment. I remember the sterile smell of that fertility clinic, the pale blue walls, the soft-voiced nurse who said things like, "Don't lose hope," in the same tone someone uses to say, "I'm sorry for your loss." The doctor had used gentle phrases, low count, reduced motility, words that were supposed to sound clinical but landed like accusations anyway. He never said impotent, not once. But when Erin said it that morning, she might as well have carved it into my chest. I remember sitting in the car after one of those appointments, her staring out the window, me gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. I wanted to tell her I was sorry. Sorry that my body had failed us. Sorry that the dream we'd built our lives around was slipping away. But she didn't look at me. She didn't need to. I could feel her disappointment like heat radiating across the seat. We told ourselves we'd made peace with it. Adoption. Maybe. Or just the two of us. Traveling. Living for ourselves. I almost believed it. But peace built on silence isn't peace, it's denial dressed up as understanding. I thought love was measured by what you survive together. Turns out, it's sometimes measured by what breaks you apart. That's what I realized sitting across from her at breakfast, watching her scroll through her phone like she was searching for a version of her life that didn't include me. At work, I tried to pretend everything was fine. Spreadsheets, emails, conference calls. The noise helped drown out the echo of her voice. But sometimes, when I'd catch my reflection in the computer screen, I'd see the truth, the slump in my shoulders, the tired eyes, the quiet defeat. Claire, my assistant, noticed before anyone else. "You look like you haven't slept in days," she said one afternoon, leaning on my office door. I smiled the way you do when you don't want someone to look too close. I'm fine, I told her, but I wasn't. Not even close. I was dying from something too small to show anyone just a sentence. 7 words that rewrote everything I thought I was. The next few nights blurred together. Work. Dinner. Silence. Repeat. On the 4th night, she came home late. The clock read almost 11. I was sitting on the couch, pretending to watch a game I couldn't follow. I heard her keys jingle. The door click. Her heels on the hardwood. She looked surprised to see me still awake. Her hair was loose. Her lipstick faded but fresh enough to tell me she'd reapplied it earlier. A faint scent of unfamiliar perfume followed her in, not the brand she usually wore. Something new. Something borrowed from a night that didn't include me. Hey, she said softly, setting her purse on the counter. Sorry. I'm late. I had dinner with an old friend. An old friend. The phrase hung in the air like cigarette smoke. She didn't need to say a name. I already knew. Ryan. She didn't look guilty. Just distant. Like she'd already moved into another life and was only stopping by this one out of habit. I nodded. Didn't ask questions. Didn't demand explanations. Because when a person starts explaining where they've been, you can hear the end of the marriage in every word. That night, I waited until she fell asleep before I let myself breathe again. The room was dark except for the faint glow of the streetlight seeping through the blinds. I stared at her back, the slow rise and fall of her shoulders, and realized something I hadn't wanted to face. I wasn't angry. I was empty, and emptiness is worse than anger. Anger means there's still something to fight for. Emptiness means it's already gone, so I lay there in the quiet, listening to the sound of a house pretending to be a home, and understood that the collapse had already happened. It just hadn't made any noise. The truth is, betrayal doesn't always come with shouting or slammed doors. Sometimes it comes dressed as indifference, quiet, polite, almost graceful. And that's what makes it so devastating. I didn't know it yet. But that silence, that unbearable stillness between us was preparing me for the next step. The step every man eventually has to take when the person he loves stops seeing him as a man at all. The step away. Thursday came quiet. Too quiet. Dinner was the same ritual it always had been, the clinking of forks, the hum of the refrigerator, the faint sound of the neighbor's dog barking through the wall. Aaron made spaghetti. I poured 2 glasses of wine. We talked about nothing. Weather. Errands. Groceries. Just noise meant to distract from the truth, sitting between us like a third guest at the table. Every word felt like pretending. Every silence felt like confession. Halfway through my meal, I looked across the table at her, the woman I had once believed was my home, and I realized something that made my stomach turn. I didn't recognize her anymore. Not her face. Not her voice. Not the way she avoided my eyes every time she said my name. And maybe worse than that, I didn't recognize myself either. I had become a man who walked on eggshells in his own house, who measured every word, who tried to earn back a respect that was already gone. That realization hit harder than anything she'd said. Harder than impotent. Harder than Ryan. After dinner, I stood in the kitchen, staring at the sink full of dishes. She was sitting on the couch scrolling her phone again, half watching some reality show that sounded like static. I dried my hands on a towel and just stopped trying to fix something that had already fallen apart. I walked upstairs, opened the closet, and pulled down an old duffel bag, the one I used for weekend fishing trips with Tom, back when life was simpler. I started filling it 2 pairs of jeans, 3 shirts, my toothbrush, my laptop, and the old paperback I'd been meaning to finish for months. That was it. That was my life boiled down to one small bag. When I came downstairs, Erin finally looked up. "Where are you going?" she asked. I took a breath. Steady. Deliberate. "If you think someone else can make you feel whole," I said, "you should go find out." Her eyes widened for a second, like she hadn't expected me to call her bluff. She opened her mouth, but nothing came out. I didn't wait for permission. I didn't ask for understanding. I just walked out the door, not with anger, not with tears. Just resolve. The night air hit me like a cold baptism. Clean. Honest. I got in my truck, started the engine, and drove with no destination. The streets were mostly empty, the kind of quiet you only get in a city that's asleep. I didn't play music, didn't call anyone, The hum of the tires on asphalt was enough. It wasn't the leaving that hurt. It was realizing I'd already been gone for years. Tom answered the door in his usual half-surprised, half-concerned expression. His apartment was what you'd expect from a single guy in his 30s, half-eaten pizza on the counter, a couch that had seen better decades, and the comforting smell of beer and detergent. He didn't ask questions, just pointed at the couch. "You can crash here as long as you need," he said, and I did. That first night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling fan, spinning slow circles. The city outside felt distant, muffled. My body was exhausted, but my mind wouldn't stop running. Every memory came back in flashes. The first night Aaron and I moved into our house. The laughter, the plans, the hope, and then the silence. For the first time, though, I didn't try to make sense of it. I just let the quiet settle. The next morning, Tom was already gone for work. I made a pot of coffee, sat on his couch, and stared at the blank TV screen. No news, no distractions, just me. The sound of the city waking up, and a question I hadn't asked myself in years. What now? I didn't know the answer yet, but I knew it couldn't be backward. That afternoon, I went apartment hunting. Nothing fancy, just a place to start over. I found it in a modest building on the east side of town. 1 bedroom, 1 bathroom, small kitchen. The kind of place no one notices but feels safe the moment you step inside. The landlord, an older woman with gray curls and kind eyes, handed me the keys after I signed the lease. When I stepped into that empty space, it hit me. No wedding photos, no pastel towels I didn't pick, no reminders of who I used to be, just walls, white, bare, waiting. I dropped my duffel bag in the middle of the floor and stood there for a long time, listening to the stillness. It was brutal, but it was honest. That night, I slept on a borrowed air mattress. No TV, no noise, no one beside me. And for the first time in 12 years, silence didn't feel like punishment. It felt like freedom. The next morning, I woke early. The sun hadn't even cleared the trees yet. I brewed Keep coffee, the kind that tasted like burnt toast, and drank it standing by the window. I watched the street below come alive, a jogger with a dog, a delivery truck, a kid on a bike heading to school. Ordinary moments, quiet ones. But they felt different now, like they belonged to me again. For the first time in a long while, I wasn't somebody's disappointment. I wasn't a husband trying to prove his worth. I was just a man with a fresh start. Even if it came wrapped in loneliness. I didn't know if I'd ever fall in love again. I didn't know if Erin would call, or if I'd ever want to hear her voice again, but I knew this: I wasn't going back. Because sometimes walking away isn't about anger or pride. It's about survival. It's about looking at the life you've been living and realizing it doesn't fit anymore, like a suit that's one size too small, choking the air out of you. And when that happens, you don't fix the suit. You take it off and start over. So that's what I did. I didn't know it yet. But that small apartment, those bare walls, that cheap coffee, that quiet would become the foundation of everything that came next. The man who left that house wasn't broken. He was unfinished, and for the first time, I was ready to see who I could be when I wasn't trying to hold someone else's world together. Time has a way of stretching after loss. The first month in that apartment felt endless mornings bleeding into nights, silence filling every space like fog. But somewhere along the way, the silence started to soften. It stopped feeling like an echo and began to sound like breathing. My breathing. I started running. Nothing heroic. Just a few miles around the neighborhood before sunrise. The first week was miserable, lungs burning, legs heavy, but the rhythm of it became its own kind of therapy. Step, breath, step. There was something honest about the pavement under my shoes. It didn't care about who I used to be, or what I'd failed at. It just met me where I was. I began doing other small things too, buying groceries without debate, cooking whatever I felt like: steak on a Tuesday, pancakes for dinner. No one to roll their eyes or count calories. I realized I'd forgotten how to eat for pleasure, how to choose things simply because I wanted them. Some days I'd sit on the floor by the window with my coffee, watching the street wake up, old men walking their dogs, teenagers in hoodies with backpacks slung low, a woman from across the street watering her plants. It was all so ordinary, And for the first time, ordinary felt sacred. Work got easier too. I stopped forcing myself to stay late just to avoid going home. Claire, my assistant, noticed before I did. You seem lighter, she said one afternoon, dropping a cup of coffee on my desk. Like something got unclenched. She was right. Something had. One Thursday, during lunch, Claire mentioned a community art class at the library downtown. You used to sketch during meetings, she said. Maybe you should try it. I almost laughed it off. Art felt like something that belonged to another version of me, the one who dreamed instead of endured. But that night, sitting in my apartment, staring at another empty evening, I looked it up. The class met on Tuesdays. $20 for 6 weeks. I signed up before I could talk myself out of it. The first class smelled like charcoal and paper, a scent that somehow made me nostalgic for something I'd never fully had. I took a seat near the back, not sure what I was doing. My lines were clumsy, my hands stiff. But as the hours passed, something in my head quieted. No looping thoughts. No replayed arguments. Just focus. That's when I met Rachel. She was 2 easels down, mid-40s. With dark hair, streaked silver, and eyes that looked like they'd seen their share of storms but never drowned in them. When the class ended, she glanced at my sketch, a lopsided vase, and smiled. You draw like you're trying to argue with the paper, she said. I laughed. A little embarrassed. Maybe I am. Well, she said, packing up her brushes. Maybe next week you can try listening instead. That was how it started, small talk over pencils and paint. Laughter over crooked lines and bad shading. The next week, she sat beside me. We talked between strokes about music, favorite books, the absurdity of people pretending they have life figured out. She told me she was a librarian who painted on weekends to stay sane. I told her I worked in engineering, which made her laugh. So you build things and break them on paper. Balance. She didn't flirt. She didn't pry. And she never once mentioned the ring I no longer wore. But when she asked how long I'd been on my own, I told her. For the first time, I said the words without shame. I told her about the morning Erin said what she said, about how I packed a bag and left, about how silence had become both my punishment and my freedom. Rachel didn't say I'm sorry. She didn't try to fix it. She just listened, really listened. The kind of listening that doesn't wait for a turn to speak. She just made space for the parts of me I hadn't looked at in a long time. After class, we walked to a diner across the street for coffee. The conversation didn't feel like therapy or small talk, it felt like air. We talked about movies we both loved, songs we'd forgotten, the way grief sneaks up when you least expect it. The following week, she brought me a sketchbook. You can't rebuild a life without documenting it, she said, sliding it across the table. Even if it's just doodles, I smiled. But inside, something shifted. I hadn't realized until then that rebuilding wasn't about replacing the past. It was about rediscovering the person buried under it. Saturdays, I started going to the farmer's market. Sometimes Rachel joined, sometimes not. Either way, it became my ritual. Fresh fruit, good coffee, people who smiled without pretense. We'd walk between stalls, talking about nothing important, and yet, those conversations felt like the most real ones I'd had in years. One morning, as we stood in line for pastries, she turned to me and said, "You look different than when I first met you." "How so?" "You don't look like you're waiting for something bad to happen anymore." I didn't know what to say. But later, I realized she was right. For the first time in years, I wasn't trying to prove anything, not to a partner, not to the world, not even to myself. I wasn't measuring my worth by anyone's approval. I was just living. I wasn't healed, not completely. Some nights, the old ache would sneak in, whispering that maybe I'd never be enough for anyone. But it didn't stay long, because every morning I ran a little farther, drew a little better, laughed a little louder, and each small act stitched something back together. Sometimes, rebuilding doesn't come with grand gestures. It comes in the quiet, in making breakfast for one, in running until your thoughts run out, in sketching the same apple 5 different ways until you finally see the beauty in imperfection. That's what my life had become, a series of small, imperfect strokes, adding up to something whole. And one evening, as the class packed up, Rachel looked at me and said, "You know, You smile with your eyes now. I didn't realize I'd stopped doing that when I walked home that night. The air was cool. The sky fading into pink and blue. I passed by shop windows and caught my reflection, not the man who'd been left behind, but the man who'd learned to stand alone, and for the first time, I didn't feel the need to look away. 3 months passed before I saw her again. It was a Sunday morning when the doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone. Outside my window, the street was quiet: joggers, coffee drinkers, the world moving as usual. When I opened the door, it was like time hesitated for a beat. Erin stood there. She looked smaller somehow, thinner, her hair shorter, her face pale in the morning light. The confidence she used to wear like armor was gone, replaced by something brittle: regret, maybe, or exhaustion. "Hi, Michael," she said, voice trembling. I didn't invite her in at first, just stood there, hand on the door, waiting to see what this was. "Can we talk?" she asked. There was a part of me that wanted to say no, to close the door and protect the peace I'd built brick by brick. But I stepped aside. Maybe I needed to hear it. Or maybe I just wanted to know if she finally understood what she'd broken. She walked in slowly, her eyes moving across the room, the books, the sketches on the wall, the small potted plants by the window, all the pieces of the life I'd built without her. "This is nice," she said softly. "It feels calm." She sat on the edge of the couch, hands clasped, eyes darting to the floor. I stayed standing, arms crossed, the space between us wide and deliberate. "Ryan wasn't what I thought," she said finally. Her voice cracked around his name. "I made a mistake." I said nothing. She went on, words tumbling now, fragile but desperate. "He's successful. Sure. Charming. Confident, all the things I thought I wanted. But he's empty. Michael. Everything with him is about what he owns, what he's achieved. When I talked about real things, things that hurt, he changed the subject. He didn't want to know me, not really." Her hands shook as she wiped her eyes. "You were a good man," she whispered. "I just didn't see it. I wanted more. And now, I don't even know what that means." I looked at her, the woman who once made me question my own worth, the one whose silence used to keep me awake at night. But the ache was gone. The anger too. What I felt instead was stillness. "I believe you," I said quietly. Her eyes lifted, a flicker of hope sparking where there shouldn't have been any. "But," I continued, "I'm not the man who needs your approval anymore." The words hung there, soft but final. Something inside her broke. I saw it happen, the realization that she hadn't lost me to another woman, but to my own peace, to the life I'd built that didn't need her validation anymore. She nodded slowly, tears falling, hands pressed to her face. "I don't know how to undo what I did," she whispered. "You can't," I said. My voice wasn't cruel, just true. For a long moment, she sat there, gathering what little dignity she still had. Then she stood, smoothed her sweater, and looked around the apartment one last time. "You look happy," she said. "I am," I replied, and that was the truth. When the door clicked shut behind her, the silence that followed wasn't heavy like before. It was clean, clear, like the air after a storm has finally passed. I stood there for a while, not moving, letting the quiet fill the room. Then I went to the window, looked out at the street. Same houses, same trees, same sunlight, but everything felt new. Some people mistake silence for weakness, but silence is just what strength sounds like after it's done explaining itself. Months passed. Life moved forward, steady and honest. The art class ended, but Rachel and I kept in touch. Coffee on Saturdays, walks through the park, conversations that flowed like water, easy, real, unforced. One weekend, she invited me to an art fair downtown. Booths lined the sidewalks, filled with handmade things, pottery, jewelry, paintings. I wandered through them beside her, a cup of coffee in one hand, sunlight on my face. At one table, I stopped. A vendor was selling leather journals, hand-stitched, the kind that smell like memory. Rachel smiled and said, "That looks like you." I bought one. That night, back in my apartment, I sat by the window with the journal open in front of me. The first page stared back, blank and waiting. I didn't know where to start. So I wrote what I knew to be true. This isn't about revenge. It's about rebuilding. And I finally built something worth keeping me. I closed the book, set it on the table, and felt a quiet satisfaction settle in. Not the rush of victory, just peace. The next morning, I laced up my running shoes and stepped out into the dawn. The city was barely awake. Streets washed in pale light. I started running slow, steady, unhurried. The rhythm of my breath matched the rhythm of my heart. And for the first time, it didn't hurt to be alone. It felt right. If you're a man like me who's ever been told you weren't enough, remember this: you don't need to prove them wrong. Just live right. That's all the proof you'll ever need. If you've ever walked through something like this, I'd like to hear your story. Tell me what you think down in the comments, because every man who speaks his truth reminds another he's not alone. And if this story hit home for you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so you don't miss the next one. More real stories are coming, stories about men who lose everything, rebuild from nothing, and come out stronger than ever.